Hey everyone, it's James here with my friend Elliot doing the podcast. Um, so this week we're actually going to talk about international soccer as well as some of the club matches and the Champions League games that are coming up next, especially Juventus against Barcelona, which is the eye catcher in everyone's eyes. And so I just wanted to start off the bat. Elliot, what do you think about Spain beating Switzerland 1-0 and Portugal drawing them 0-0? Do you think that Spain, that their defense is better than people give them recognition for, especially with Kepa in goal?
Yeah, I mean, Spain, it's not the Spain of old, obviously, but I think they have some good pieces surrounding that team. I just think it needs a little bit more time to figure out their identity and who they are. I think they have a good team. I think they have good defense. I think they just need time to develop that identity and that chemistry, where because they're in kind of like a transitional phase right now, where they're trying to just kind of get back to the old days, but trying to figure out what the best way about going about doing that is. And Portugal, what happened in the game today with Portugal? Sorry.
Oh, they drew 0-0 with France and they drew 0-0 with Spain. And so I was wondering, actually, I'll flip it to Portugal.
Yeah.
Do you think that despite having Cristiano Ronaldo and Joao Felix, that they're actually suffering from a lack of goals?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Portugal obviously have a lot of talented players back to front. I actually think making Cristiano Ronaldo the vocal point of Portugal is a mistake, because this is his last go-round. They need to build this team around Joao Felix, and they need to use – and obviously Ronaldo is probably still a better player, but I think Joao Felix needs to be the team needs to cater to his style of play and what he does versus Ronaldo, because I think if you're looking at this in a long term, if you're just trying to go to one tournament and be successful, okay, then just do the Ronaldo thing. But if you're trying to build a team through a young player that can hold up the nation for the next 10 years, you need to start prioritizing Joao Felix as the vocal point. Not to say that Ronaldo can't be Ronaldo and have those moments, but I think Joao Felix, same with Atletico Madrid with him there. They need to make everything they do about the team, obviously, but they need him to be the vocal point, to be the franchise player, where Ronaldo still is a franchise player in that respect. But I feel like making it all about Ronaldo can, in some sense, stunt the growth of Joao Felix, who I rate incredibly highly. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think, I know Spain and France are good teams, and they didn't lose, but they didn't win either. So it's for those teams specifically, it's a decent result, but I think it's more bad than good. And they need to start, like, my thing is just give Joao Felix, make him the vocal point of the attack, and I think they'll start to get better results. And Ronaldo will still get his goal, other people will still get the goals. But I think there's a little bit of an identity crisis with that, because not Ronaldo, Felix, because I think they know their position in the team, but the other players in the team, most of the younger players, don't know who to look to for that moment that when they're in these games. And some people probably think, not publicly saying this, but behind closed doors and just in their heads, probably think that Felix is the one where he's the one who's going to get us to that level. And then the others probably think Ronaldo still is the one to look for. So the thing in Portugal, I think it's just an identity crisis. And once they figure out that position and what they're doing, then they'll be in position to sort of, go further in that way. You know what I mean?
I agree with you, because Joao Felix has some of the best mentors now. He has Luis Suarez at Atletico Madrid at club level, and an international level, he has an idol in Cristiano Ronaldo.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he's learning from some, average finishers. He's learning from some of the best to have ever done it. Maybe not, in Suarez, great player, I rate him highly, but Ronaldo is a level above. So he'd actually want to play as much with Ronaldo as possible.
Yeah.
And so on that, I ask you, do you think that Joao Felix belongs on the wing or a second striker or even the main striker? Where would you place him in the national team?
This is going to sound crazy. I like him in the the baller position underneath the strikers, because the problem with him, look, I think he's too good to be on the wing, and he provides too many striker qualities to put him on the side. But putting him up front, it limits his other things he does so well. You put him beneath, like underneath, and I don't know what formation they would play, but put him in maybe like a false 9 role right beneath the striker. He's great passing ability, and he's an excellent dribbler, and he can score goals. So those are all incredible qualities. But I feel like if you put João Felix in a position where he can pass and dribble more frequently, then up front where his main priority would be to score goals. So I think putting him in a striker position I think overwhelms the other things he's good at and makes it all about we need to get goals from him, where I think you put him behind the striker where he can still pass and facilitate to Ronaldo and whoever he's partnered with, like Andre Silva or something like that. And he can still be able to dribble, do his dribbling thing and sort of impact the match in that way. Where if you put him as a striker, you're basically looking at him just for goals. And with the wing, you are looking just for him to facilitate. So you put him underneath the striker, I feel like it opens the gap for him to be able to do both things at a high level. Because if you put him in certain positions, some of the other things that he's doing won't be as noticeable or highlighted, or he won't be able to kind of play that role.
So who do you think is his like historical equivalent? Like when you say second striker, creative, can dribble, I think of Pavel Nedved, but maybe a Neymar. Like who do you think João Felix is most similar to that we can try to compare him to?
That's a tough one because there's a lot of players who sort of he kind of reminds me of. I know this guy played the striker role, but I think he reminds me a little bit of Van Basten because great finisher and obviously played the striker, but he also had dribbling ability and the ability to pass. There's a few other ones that I think also would be equivalent, but they're too great for me to mention in the same sentence as Jack Felix, so I don't want to do it.
No, I'm curious. It's like I was thinking, not for the physical resemblance of Kaká, but I was thinking about it. Like he kind of does play a little bit like Kaká, but with more skill.
Kaká was one of them I thought of, and the other one was Cruyff. And I hope. Not at the level, but just the way he plays is a little bit similar. So don't get me wrong. I love Cruyff probably more than any human alive. Yeah. So I'm not saying he's in the same class. What I'm saying is the way, not how they play, but where the positionally, where they're the strongest is similar. Where he needs to be, Cruyff needed to be in a situation where he wasn't so up front, where he just has to score, and not all the way on the wing where he just has to do one thing. I feel like similar positionally. I just want to make it real clear. I'm not comparing them or anything.
I agree.
Like that.
It's the same like when people say Salah and Messi. Like I see it, but they're not in any way, shape, or form saying that Salah is Messi. So I totally get that.
Right. I'm not comparing them. I'm just saying systematically they play similarly to the point where, again, they play positions where it's more than just one skill. Because a lot of strikers, at least a lot of goal scorers, the primary goal for them is to be scoring goals. And for a winger, it's a lot of facilitation and some goal scoring as well. Where playing behind the striker, players like that can do more than one thing. So if you're great at passing, playing a striker is actually not the best idea, just because it depends on how you pass, obviously, and where you see the gaps of where your passing lanes go. But if you're a passer that is I don't know how to explain it, like someone who hits a lot of good through balls, playing a striker doesn't allow you to do that. So it's almost better for them to be a little bit further back while still pushing up front.
Like a Benzema?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And don't get me wrong, there's strikers who can pass like Harry Kane and Dzeko, but I feel like the way when João Felix makes passing lanes or contributes in that way, it's a lot of through ball stuff. It's not a lot of crosses from the wing or, fancy back passes that a lot of strikers make. It's more of the I'm going to get you the ball where you're going to be, that sort of thing.
Do you think he's just like a Griezmann replacement? Because now that I think about it, the narrative around Griezmann and João Felix isn't as it's more direct than how it was appearing. Like it was pretty direct as of what we thought, which was like for like replacement,
Mm-hmm.
120 in, 126 out. But now that I think about it, Griezmann was bought from Real Sociedad to play left wing at Atletico Madrid.
Yep.
Slowly became their second striker behind Fernando
Yeah,
Torres.
He transitioned. Yeah.
Same thing is happening to João Felix, where it's like he was a left winger. Now he's becoming more of a second striker. Or maybe he always was, but it's the same exact transition. When he came on against RB Leipzig in the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League,
He changed the game.
he was doing bits on the wing, and it was when he moved centrally that it became way more dangerous, and he got the penalty. I feel like certain players, they just have that impact down the middle, but they're sometimes shifted to the wing.
Right, and I'll say this, and it's funny, I've already talked about this today, but so when he came to Atletico Madrid, it was to a point where they thought that he was going to be the next, he's just going to come in and replace Griezmann, and a lot of people were pushing that narrative. And the reason I feel like he didn't have a great season is he's not being helped by a lot. And I know he had Morata and Douglas Costa. I don't rate those two that highly at this point. And so the fact that he was sort of having to deal with all this and replace someone who was at one point voted the third best player in the world, even though that may not be accurate. But so the whole idea was that they're just going to replace him, boom, and they're going to get the 20 goals back. And it just doesn't work like that, because I don't see him as an out-and-out striker. I see him as someone who he's far too good at facilitating for him to just be like a center forward, where he should be playing underneath the striker where he can supply his other genius. But like you said, the RB Leipzig game is a big one, because when he went more centrally, he changed the game. He got that penalty. They got back in the game. And if it wasn't for Tyler Adams, they could have gone into extra time. But there was no momentum driving Atletico Madrid until he had come on. So you can see the incredible talent like right away. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Oh, my bad. My mic cut out.
All
Do you think there's any talent quite like Joao Felix at the moment? And do you think he's like a top 3 wonder kid? Because with Mbappe, you play him up front or on the wing, or even at right wing in the World Cup with friends. He was fabulous. Do you think that Joao Felix is of that same quality or of that same potential?
Yeah. The two wonder kids I think of when I think of wonder kids, and I think there's only a few, but Haaland from Dortmund and Felix are the ones that I look at as those two are going to be the ones with the generational talent. And obviously, Mbappe is a super talent, but it's just the way that Felix and Haaland play that allow them to do more, if that makes sense. Where Mbappe is a speedster who can do a lot, but it's his entire game is based on his ability to score goals and finish and pace. Where Felix and Haaland both, I think, they do more in the game. I'm not saying they're not. At this point, Mbappe's better, but I feel like with those two perspectives, Haaland and Felix, it's more about all the things they do. They're not just looking for goals. They're looking for Felix to control the midfield, also to kick it out to the wing, and also to score goals. With Haaland is the same thing. It's not always about him scoring goals. He scores a ton, but it's the other things he does. And quick segue, I just want to mention this. In the game against Freiburg, Haaland had a one-on-one with the goalkeeper. He easily could have scored. It would have been taking nothing, and he makes the unselfish play to kick it out to I don't remember who it was with the open goal. And stuff like that makes me feel like those are the two to look at, even though Mbappe is the one everyone talks about. Those are the two that I feel like can impact the game in a more dramatical way, where Mbappe is based on flash and it's on speed and it's on finishing ability, where the other two it's more about their totality of skills, where it's not just like one thing people are expecting from them.
A lot has been said in the Spanish media by La Marca, who say that they could play together, Mbappe and Haaland. Do you think that would diminish their careers in the long run?
Potentially, maybe. I don't know. I don't think they work together, because Mbappe is a person who is just his game is based on his ability to finish and his speed and athleticism and all this stuff. And Haaland, he's quick. Don't get me wrong. He's fast. He's really fast. But he's also looking to make that extra pass and putting contributing to some of the stuff that goes on in the midfield and pushing forward to put him into the best position to score. Where it feels like if he played with someone like Mbappe, it would be too. I don't know what the word is. It just. I don't think it would click because of how different the styles are, and different strikers can help each other. But I feel like with the athleticism of Mbappe versus Holland's more of a collective game, I just think it would. I would if I'm whoever's going to come in for him or either one of them, I would advise not putting those two together because I could be wrong, but it doesn't seem like the way those two play will complement each other. Where someone who with a different style could complement, but it's just like, and then it's going to be one of those things where it's just the identity of the team could go sour because of the incredible talents of the two, and how are they going to balance that? And I'm not sure if that would work just based on the fact that they're so different and the games they play don't really complement each other, which is I think a big problem if you're trying to build a team. So if I'm Real Madrid, I would go for one, not both.
You think? Oh, speaking of Real Madrid, do you think that they would be priced out of one or two of them? Do you think Holland's price is going, to Neymar levels at 200 million? I know he has a release clause of 75 million, but obviously an extension of his contract could nullify that. As for Mbappe, he doesn't have a release clause, but that's not a good thing because he goes for whatever the PSG want him to go for.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think these two players are going to be like going for world record fees if they do want to move?
I think Mbappe will probably go for 400 million, which only really leaves Real Madrid, Man City, and that's it basically. I think he would go probably I think he'd go close. I think he'd be surpassed 300 million, maybe 400 million. Where Holland, I think in terms of the transfer stuff, I think there's certain things he has to achieve before he can justify a price tag of 200 million and upwards. I actually think that Holland will stay at Dortmund for the next couple of years. I don't see him leaving in the near future. That's just the way I see it, just because of the surrounding pieces that he has there. So if you're going to leave a situation like that, you got to go to a situation that's better. And as far as young talent, I'm not sure there is a situation that's better with experience. So Holland is at this point is still a 100 million plus player. I just think he needs to do a little bit more to reach the Neymar numbers. But after this season, he might by that time do enough. Because if he goes for another 40 goal season, then I think it's just going to be ridiculous the type of money that it would require for him to leave Dortmund.
I agree with you because the 40 goal quota, you say, is world class. When Suarez hit it, it was more than Messi and Ronaldo in 2016. Yeah. And Lewandowski, I don't even think he hit it this season. But that's probably to do with the coronavirus. Yeah. And so if Holland starts hitting 40 goal numbers, he will inevitably be world class. And speaking of world class, do you think that's a quality that you can develop overnight? Or is it something you always had?
Wait, in terms of what?
Like what makes a player world class? For example, Gareth Bale, when he had that hat trick against Inter Milan in the group stages, we had glimpses that he would be world class because that was a world class performance. But it wasn't like he was recognized as world class until his 2012-2013 final season at Tottenham Hotspur. So do you think Holland is on the brink of world class this season?
Yeah, I think and look, I don't think there's that. I think there's 30 players or less that are at that level. And I'm not willing to budge until someone else drops out. That's just the way I look at it. But when Ronaldo hits that, and as much as he's been great, his career, Real Madrid Ronaldo, I've mentioned many times, he was a problem for everybody. I mean, nobody wanted to see him. I'm pretty sure most defenders wouldn't mind seeing Juve Ronaldo, and that's just the way I look at it. There might be some others that might drop out, but Ronaldo is the one I think on that list or on the lists is most likely to dip because of his age and stuff. If he plays like he has this season with Juventus the rest of the year, he's dropping out. Holland's taking his place. That's just the way I see it. But Holland will justify a world-class tag maybe even by January, because he's scoring goals and he's facilitating goals. And this is a really important point. His link-up play with Gio Reyna who's the new star, one of the new stars of that Dortmund team, is like family chemistry. You know what I mean? So it's just like with Holland, I think if those two are on the same page and they get Sancho involved and they get some of the other players involved, he'll be world class really quickly. But again, I think it would take someone else dropping out of the world class, I guess, list to do that. And I'm sure at some point this season, one of these world-class keepers will, or not keepers, world-class players there will be somebody who we don't view in the same way as a world-class player. They'll basically go from they'll go down to top class. But I think it's very likely if one of these spaces free up, or if he's so good that you have to add him to the list, that he'll inevitably being in that class with the rest of the players that are at that level.
There's two reasons I mentioned this, because I was watching a Lionel Messi compilation, and he scores his free kick against Casillas in the Super Cup, and the commentator says, "Wow, it's world class," and then the other commentator said, "It's Messi class. That's above world class." And so it just really made me think of the structure of football, and there's really no space up there. It's really claustrophobic. It's either Messi or Ronaldo. And so my question to you is, who do you think, if you had to choose 3 players who can reach, maybe not Messi class, but be the best of the world class, who would they be?
Jesus. Well, I'm gonna say Holland with one. I'm gonna say De Ligt. Okay. I think he is about a month away from being the best defender in the world. I think he's easily number 2. And from last January to now, he has pretty much outplayed Van Dijk over that time period. If he's able to, I just think he'll be the best defender in the world before he can buy alcohol, in my opinion. And he's like, I think 19, 20 years old. He's just going to be at a level that I think, and it's a defender, it's not a sexy position, but in terms of generational talents to that position, that's the only one I see. There's other ones that have those qualities, but I think he's definitely one that's going to be in that class. And then I'd have to go João Felix. Another one I thought of was Alphonso Davies, but I think if you're gonna be a left back, he has to defend a little bit better for me to be able to really make that claim, especially with the Bayern Munich defense that's conceded 9 in 3 games. So I would say Felix, though. He's the biggest. I think he probably has the highest upside. The question with that is whether or not he'll reach an upside of that sort of magnitude is another question for another day. But based on what we have so far, out of the sample size we do, him, Holland, and De Ligt are the 3 that I feel like of all these players have the most potential to reach an outrageous level of world class.
So, on the topic of De Ligt, do you think that he is keeping Juventus up? Do you think that his, tuition, I guess, tutoring from Giorgio Chiellini in one of the best, hardest defensive leagues in Europe is what's molding him into a top player? Or do you think he already had it in him?
Oh, well, he had it in him the day he came to Juve, but it escalated massively getting to learn from someone like that. Getting to learn from a player who's been there, done that, won at pretty much everything on every level, but still has that hunger to win again and again and again. It only helps a player become what people see them as and what they can ultimately become because he can become the best defender in the world. He can become a player that wins the Ballon d'Or. I don't think he ever will, because I don't think the media will ever give him that love. But based on what he has around him, with Cicciolini and even Buffon and even some other players in that team with Szczesny and Ronaldo and all these other players, even just Juve players in general who've won, that's going to help him just in the mentality part of how to approach the game in a certain way and to really create that separation between himself and everybody else. And because I think Van Dijk is the only person that is potentially in his way as far as becoming that best defender of the world. And Van Dijk has done it over several seasons, so it's going to take some time for him to be able to do that. But at the rate that he's playing at, he could be that very shortly, even before the end of the season.
Who do you think is the second best young defender? They all seem to be in the Bundesliga or in Syria. In the Premier League.
All right, I'll give you two answers because one's going to sound like a homer. I would say the one on Leipzig. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I think he's one. He's a good one. Actually, I'm going to say a few people. Him, I would say Max Kambula and Roger Ibanez are both in terms of Ibanez is 22, but what he did to Ronaldo in the Juve game and what he's done in the league so far this season is tremendous. And Max Kambula just has an enormous ceiling. And then there's young defenders. And then I'll even put Davies and Theo Hernandez in there. Both of those players need to be better defensively. But the thing with those two is if they master that part of the game, they'll be mutually unstoppable. And I'll also say Mendy from Real Madrid, who I think is really exceptional.
I'm really glad you mentioned those players because it just sparked a new entire I can come up with an article like that in my head.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, who would be the starting left back of the French national team if it were up to you? Ferland Mendy, Theo Hernandez, or Lucas Hernandez?
I'd go with Mendy personally. Lucas Hernandez hasn't played enough games. I think he's not playing regularly as much as the other two. And look, I have nothing but positive things to say about Theo Hernandez's ability offensively. I have nothing nice to say with him defensively. It's just, look, this is going to be a make or break for Theo Hernandez. And I have a friend who's a Juve fan who does a lot of, but very unbiased. He thinks that the way that AC Milan have made, he's being talked about in the light that he has because the rest of the AC Milan team over the last 2 years hasn't been that great, and they finally have a player that is exciting and fun, and so they totally disregard the fact that he doesn't defend well. I think he does a really good job at what he does best, but for him to be at that level, I think he needs to want to defend, want to learn to defend. It's just like Ben Simmons not wanting to shoot. So if he needs to have a different sort of approach, if he really wants to be the best left back in the league, he needs to learn to defend. And if that's what he really wants to do, he will go out there and improve. That will be the one aspect of this game that he will continue to improve on. So far, I've seen no improvements defensively from last season to this season. But if he's able to master that, he can be one of the best defenders in the world. But if he's not interested in that, they might even, I don't know, put him on a wing instead, because you can't be the reason your team is winning and losing. Because so many games last season for AC Milan that he was the reason they scored, but he was also the reason they conceded, and that's my issue. Look, all due respect to Genoa, but they don't have a lot of great attacking players. If an average attacking player is dribbling past you, any coach that is playing against AC Milan is going to attack that part of the field because they know that your defensive abilities are not at the level they need to be at. So, but if he's able to do that, if he's able to handle that part of the game, if he improves defensively, his ceiling is enormous. It's just my concern is whether or not he'll approach it in that way. You know what I mean?
Do you think that's what makes Ferland Mendy stand apart? Because I think of Ferland Mendy as the kind of player who could fit any system. Any system. He can attack, he can defend. He's not a shooter. He's not necessarily a selfish player. And I remember in the derby against Atletico Madrid, he crossed it into Benzema. He can do what people say he can't do. And generally, he scored a goal to win Real Madrid La Liga, believe it or not.
Yeah.
He's not the kind of player who, in accompaniment to a Cristiano Ronaldo, becomes great. For example, with Marcelo in the national team, bar a few moments, was essentially just there by his name alone. There are other players that, like Felipe Luis back in the day, even Tejas, who deserve to be there based on what they could do, on the fact that they could perform alone. But Marcelo without Ronaldo was not Marcelo, and that's honestly my opinion.
Yeah, and
Whereas
Marcelo's been great, and I think that's important to mention. But he also never was great defensively either.
neither.
His weapon was what he was able to do going forward, and it worked a little bit because I don't think Marcelo was ever. I mean, sometimes, but he wasn't consistently the reason they conceded. So it was a little bit better than Theo is defensively, but not by much. So he was also a very offensive weapon where Mendy does both things well, which is why he is so valuable right now because it's like the way AC Milan, or I guess an objective AC Milan fan looks at Theo Hernandez and frustrates, I bet there's a frustration with the defense. And then you see Mendy do what he does. It's like that's what they would love Theo Hernandez to be able to do. So I think he's very versatile. He's not a goal scorer that much, but he can come forward and defend. And that's the one thing in terms of football positions that's hard to find. A left back or a right back that does both well. At least on that level. Whose a mentality is to attack but still can defend. You're priceless in this game.
That genuinely triggers my, like, I guess every podcast I have to mention him. Lionel Messi.
Yeah.
Do you think that he shifted to right wing, not out of necessity of the integration of Luis Suarez in 2015, but because he knows that fullbacks are the least defensive defenders in the back line?
That's genius. That's genius. No, yeah, I agree. I think that's one of those things where Messi's intelligence is just on a different level than everybody else. He's why I would say at least 50% of football fans have him as the GOAT. And I think I would be hard pressed to think that anyone has him below like 3. I mean that's how good he is. When your worst case scenario is third best player ever, you're just a different level of class. But just I think that just highlights how smart he is and intelligent he is, and that's all I can really say on that. He's just a genius, and for him to be able to do that, and he's right. Left backs and right backs can't defend. And the ones who can defend don't operate on the level of some of the other ones. What's the name? The Napoli defender who plays right back, Giovanni Di Lorenzo. He's not great going forward. He's good enough going forward, but he defends way better than any of these left backs or right backs pushing forward. And I actually think he's criminally underrated. I'm not saying he's the best in the league or anything like that, but there are players like Davies and Hernandez, and even like a person like Kolarov and other just some offensively minded players who go forward, but he does both, just not at the same offensive peak, but he's consistent in both areas, just like Mendy is.
And do you think that that's something that has diminished over the years? Like, do you think that like for example, Paolo Maldini is a gem you can't really find anymore?
Yeah.
Like a center back playing left back, it's just such an amazing asset to have. Although I've told my friends this many times, like my dream defense has some of the weirdest names. It has Thuram, has Rijkaard, has Maldini, because they're like unicorns. Basketball, Kevin Durant and Kristaps Porzingis are considered like 1 in a million. That's how I thought Thuram, Rijkaard, and Maldini are. If I had a back 3, it would have to be them, bar like Beckenbauer and some of the other greatest defenders ever. But it's that ability to be able to not do everything, but if your job is to defend more than it is to attack, to be able to do that. Do you think that it's prioritized to attack nowadays for fullbacks, and that's the reason why they can't really defend as well?
It's not just fullbacks; it's all the defense. We used to live in an day and age where defenders never scored, except occasionally, like on a corner or a free kick or something like that. And now they're being taught to push, which is making that position so much offensive. And now it's center backs are defenders, left backs and right backs are they're just wingers that are just dropped back. Just because there's so much offensive power coming from those two positions, while not the defensive stuff that the other thing. This is what makes players like Ligt and Van Dijk and Koulibaly and players like that so valuable, is because it just doesn't seem that just in general we're defending at the same level. In every league, lots of good teams are conceding loads of goals because they're not building their back line based on defense. They're building it based on, I have one great defender So now I can put these offensive left backs and right backs to push us and to feed into the attack. Where before, you prioritize the defense with even like Rio Ferdinand, Gary Neville, John Terry, Cafu, and Maldini, Zanetti. So all these guys where it was more about defense than offense really, and now it's becoming just the way the game is going, and I like it that it's going this way. But that's why defenders right now are, I think, the biggest issue with a lot of clubs, because you can literally attack a side of the field that has a weak defender. Because I know I can attack this guy, and even if I'm not the best player, I've seen him get dribbled past by players who are not as good as me. So that's how you can approach those games, and it's interesting. It's just a new era of football, but I just think it's less focused on the defensive, powers of like a team.
And the reason I mentioned that is because I'll actually pull this up. Like, there are Italy's defenders. So you can't really say his name, but Gaetano Scirea. We've heard of this guy.
Yeah,
Italy's
sure.
World Cup winning center back of 1982 in Spain. I have to mention.
Yeah.
But Italy used to be that factory of defenders, world-class talent. And when I asked you before if Ligt had it in him coming into Serie A as a good defender or not, do you think it's because more of the foreign defenders are coming to Serie A and keeping it that way? Or do you think that Italy still is the home of defending?
It's interesting because I think that's what people think, is that Serie A is a defensive league. I actually don't agree with that. I think it's more attacking the defensive at this point. The reason De Ligt is going to end up being the best defender in the world in no more than a year is because he struggled immediately. That's why I rate him so highly. He made some really horrific, and I'm talking like really horrific defensive mistakes in the first couple weeks of the season. He looked like a flop.
Handballs.
Yes, handballs. He conceded some penalties. It was just a disaster. And then and that's why you should hold off judgment. Then he started to understand Italian football. He understand how we defend. This is the way we approach this situation. If they have this lineup and they're going to attack with these two pieces, this is how we defend that setup. So once he learned the ropes of Italian football, he was the best defender in the league once he sort of figured everything out. And I made a top 50 Serie A players last season list. I think he was in my top 5. I think so, at least. He was in the top 10 for sure. And just because he had so much say over what they did defensively. And once he had to be taught by some other players how to do this, but once he figured it out, then it just became one of those things where it was just like an extremely high level of defending, that he is basically the difference between Juventus winning the league and not being in a Champions League place. So it just comes like that. There's other defenders also on Juve who I like, that's why I think Juve long term can be a really fantastic title team. Not this year, but beyond this year, is because they have Di Maria, who's coming off an injury. But those two players have that defender's mentality, and that's their main focus is how to dictate what they do with some of the other things, that the way they're being attacked. And this is why I think when Italy go in the Champions League with their teams, this is why I think they're going to have an advantage, because they're in the most attacking league, and their abilities and they're being taught the defensive way of football at the same time. Even though it's not a defensive league, they're still passing down those same values that Italian football has taught their players for 100 years. So that's what makes it such a interesting and intriguing dynamic.
The reason I bring up Italy is because, like I mentioned Messi earlier before, the teams that have been able to mitigate his attack have been Juventus and some of these top Italian sides. Yeah. And so in 2017, like was mentioned before, in last week's or 2 weeks ago's podcast, they held Barcelona to 0 goals in 180 minutes of aggregate football in the Champions League. To me, that's insane, because they had Messi, Suarez, and Neymar arguably in their best state. That was the last time we ever saw that formation. And
you have to remember, they were just coming off a huge high after the huge comeback against PSG.
Yeah.
So the momentum was driving towards the Champions League final, and then they went against a Juventus team that knew how to defend. And this was old school Juventus. I think they had God, they had they had Cicciolini, Bonucci, and all that, but they also had some other pieces, old defenders who'd been there a long time, who were on the back half of their careers. I can't pronounce his name. Starts with a B. Brazaghi or something like that.
Barzagli.
Yeah, so he had him, who at the time was an older player, but knew how to defend Barcelona. And players of that sort of old generation, Juve, knew exactly what to do to stop that team, and that's exactly what they did. They didn't score a goal in 2 games against them, and they win that because of their ability to shut off one side of the field.
That actually reminds me. I know I'm going to mention FIFA for a second, but that's just because I remember it. When Bonucci went to AC Milan,
Yeah.
flopped. Then, or at least in the eyes of many, he underperformed and went back to Juventus and became world class again. That was like a weird deviation.
Yeah.
Why do you think that happened?
Because again, like we talked about last week, and this was, I think, our biggest takeaway from last week: winning intangibles. What is Juventus known for? To win at all costs. They can play ugly. They can play distraught. It can look like you're going to beat them for 90 minutes, and then something happens. When I think of that, I think of Juventus versus Inter Milan a few years ago, where Higuain scored a winner at the end with a header goal, where Inter were up with like 5 minutes to go, and then Juve scored at the very end, right before the 90th minute, and then they scored an extra time to win the game. And stuff like that. If that's AC Milan, or that's even Inter, they're not winning that game because of the winning intangibles. So you can go from a team. Look, he went to AC Milan, a team that was in an unfortunate period. They're not where they are now. They're in a better place now. But back then they were in a place where they still lacked the mentality to win, and they still lacked a lot of ingredients that would drive them towards matches where they could outperform teams that are not as good as them, because they lost a lot of games in that season to teams that were well below them in terms of player for player talent. Where you go back to Juve, then he goes to Juve, and look, I still think that he's not one of their best defenders, but he changed. His quality was much higher at Juve than it ever was at AC Milan. But I think that the big reason is because of the winning culture of Juventus, where they're used to winning. This is what the foundation of Juventus is. Where AC Milan, it's been at least the last decade, is disappointment and failing to make Champions League, just period. So I think the transition of going from a winning franchise to a losing franchise back to a winning franchise, it's clear why he looks as he does. At least to a certain extent of that.
Do you think a player like Bonucci would survive in another league? Or do you think do you think he's a world-class defender?
I don't think he is now. At one point he was. And I don't think he held on to it as long as he probably could have. I think he didn't want it bad enough. That's just the way I look at it. Yeah. So Bonucci was world class. I don't think he is anymore. Could he handle the Premier League? I think he could. I mean, he wouldn't go to a team that's not very good, but like a Chelsea, Man City, or something like that, even like a Arsenal or something. I think that's possible. I'm not sure he can handle German football, just because the way they defend is so different that I think he would have a hard time adapting to that. With England, I feel like even if he doesn't adapt to English football, his ability, his just individual ability is higher than most of the defenders in that league, just individually speaking, that he would be able to handle that. Where if he goes to Germany, the higher identity of defending in Germany is different. So it's just like, I think he would struggle in there, but there are situations where he would be okay with. I think he could defend in Spain as well, but I think Germany would be a challenge for him. But so I don't know. That's the way I see it.
The reason I bring it up is because when people think of Bonucci, they think for some reason of 2017 when Juventus made the Champions League final. I remember when Italy took one of their weakest teams ever to the quarterfinals of the Euro.
Yeah, I remember.
That penalty against Germany. And that was the tournament where, for me, Bonucci, showed the world what he was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
A defender taking a penalty in a quarterfinal against Germany. Wow. I I remember that game like it was yesterday, and I can never forget. But
Mhm.
why is it that I remember just because he scored? Like, why do you think the narrative of defenders being great is only behind goals? Sergio Ramos in the Champions League final,
Mhm.
Maldini in a Champions League final. I mean, I know that Maldini is known for many more things, but
Yeah.
ask anyone, and that's the thing they'll think of.
Yeah.
Puyol, World Cup semifinal against Germany. Why is it always goals that define defenders? And do you think that's going to hinder De Ligt in any way?
It will, because I don't think Dillit's going to score that many goals. All due respect, he is. Okay, look. So Van Dijk has the package. De Ligt is the most technically gifted defender we have in football right now. I think he's better defensively, just from a defensive perspective. He doesn't have the size of Van Dijk, which helps Van Dijk in some ways, and he doesn't have some of the offense of Van Dijk. And Van Dijk isn't a down the field sort of defender like Theo Hernandez, but he gets in set pieces and does a lot of great things. But just from a defensive perspective, the way he marks his man and leaves people to dry is just, it's almost, it's sound like a strange word, but almost savage, considering some of the players he's going against. Look, Lukaku and Martinez are the best duo in Italian football, at least in my opinion, that they were last season. In 2 games against Juventus, they did practically nothing, because this is the beauty about that duo. A lot of the times, Martinez takes their best defender away from Lukaku, as he provides more of a threat because he's quicker and more athletic, leaving Lukaku in a vulnerable space where he can execute on that. And this is the way Martinez plays, and he manipulates so many people into taking the bait. And when he goes up against De Ligt, it's not only that he doesn't take the bait, it's just like the way he plays is like, that's just insulting. You really thought I was going to fall for that? And then they have to play him they have to basically attack at De Ligt, because you get past De Ligt, you score a goal. And every time I've seen them try to cut into the box and make these little runs, and Martinez is quick and athletic, he gets in the box. But as soon as he got in the box, De Ligt was in the right position at the right time, taking the ball away. So it's basically, he creates, you'll appreciate this, he creates sort of like a force field around the box, inside the box. So the only way to score when De Ligt's at his best, you cannot score inside the box. You have to score a worldie from outside, because he basically it's like a black hole inside the box, where he's welcoming you into the space and to be effective, and then he's just humiliating anyone who comes in there. And I'm talking anybody, any of the best strikers in the league have gone into that space and not done well. Immobile was incredible last season against Juventus, not against Juventus totally, but when he was against De Ligt head to head, he didn't fare well, because he creates so much mayhem inside the box, where a lot of other defenders haven't mastered that. Because the way he moves and the way he sees the game, it's like he sees stuff before it's going to happen. And I'm not saying that he's on a level with, any of these all-time great defenders, but for a player of his age to understand that part of defending is just tremendous, because it's very difficult to beat him inside the box. If you do it once, you should take that ball home with you, because it's probably not going to happen again in that season. He doesn't defend that much outside the box, and he's capable of doing that. But the only way to really outduel him is from outside the box, because you go into that box and he makes it a very uncomfortable situation, where it has to be like a moment of athleticism to sort of outduel him in those really specific areas.
So actually, the Netherlands lost a friendly. It was by a penalty against Mexico.
Yeah.
And I believe they played it against Bosnia, where, it's just been a rough period for all footballers, I guess, world class or not, in this international break. Like, they're just not really appearing. Do you think that there's a reason behind that?
Yeah, we've only seen 3 games in the leagues, so I don't think they're in season form yet. For at least most of them don't seem to be in season form. Papu Gomez is certainly in season form, but pretty much everyone else is just trying to figure it out, and it's weird. What I found really interesting, and we can talk about that, but I want to talk the Italy game, when they beat Moldova or whatever. The best player was El Shaarawy, who scored a brace and an easy victory for Italy. He was the best player on the pitch, and he hasn't played since last season. because of what everything's going on over there, and he's basically he was looking to secure a move, and that didn't happen. But he hasn't really played competitively in any league recently because of what's happening in China right now. And he came into that team and just immediately hit. And if you look at all these games, the players that are playing the best are the players who played the least, which is an interesting dynamic. And I think it's because I actually don't know why that's happening, but it seems like a lot of these players that have failed to gain form, and once they gain form, they should be doing better. And then players, it's interesting just because I'm not saying they had to make the international break sooner or here, but I think I would have liked if we'll see a better collective performance by individual players when the next international break hits, because they've only played a couple of games, and I don't think that's enough to really get into season form.
I'm just going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Who's going to win in this next World Cup? If you have to decide right now, now that we're in 2021 and it's next summer.
So,
next winter.
Wait, are you talking about the Euros or the World Cup?
I was talking about the World Cup, but I'll chuck the Euros in there anyways. So the Euros.
Okay, Belgium will win the Euros. The Netherlands will win the next World Cup.
Wow. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
I'm looking at a long-term investment with the Netherlands, because they have, like I say, they have Van Dijk. Just think about that. They have the two best defenders in the world in the same team, and then they have obviously a lot of other good Dutch players that haven't popped yet, but will pop at that point. So I think it'll be a collective display for that. And the reason I think Belgium will win the win the Euros is because they can't afford not to. France, I think, I have a funny feeling about France that they won't be able to really come out with the same energy as it has the last time. I think they'll be in contention for it, but I think Belgium has more riding on this, because if they don't win the Euros or at least make the final, I think their manager is going to get fired. And on top of that, I just think they have a loaded team. They have Lukaku, Hazard, and so many, and Mertens, and so many others. And Lukaku is a big one for me, just because you can say he didn't have a great performance against whoever it was, but he's taking his game to another level. He's also flirting with world class. He needs to score in the big games for him to justify that, but they just back to front have quality throughout this entire team. So I think short term, the Belgium are set up perfectly. Long term, by the World Cup, I think it's going to be the Holland, because of what they're going to end up becoming over the next year or next couple of years before they hit the before they hit the World Cup. The entire team as a whole will develop into a much stronger team, and they're going to go into the World Cup as one of the favorites. No one's looking at that now. No one's looking at them as favorites. By the year 2021, we will be looking at them as favorites because of what as a group they'll become in the next couple of years.
Looking at it historically, I like the fact that you mentioned Belgium immediately afterwards. You mentioned France or the Netherlands. Do you think that in the 2018 World Cup, that semi-final between the Belgium and France was the final before the final, like they say in Spain?
Yeah, I mean, I'll buy that. I mean, it was I thought it was one of the most entertaining matches of the whole tournament. I thought that's a game that they if they played over 5-6 times, or if they played a two-legged affair, you just don't know who's going to be on top. France came on top on that particular night, and the Belgium had a rocky tournament to start, but then they started really grabbing some form at the end. The Japan thing was a scare, to be honest, I think they got a little lucky on the way that last ball bounced, allowing this counterattack to explode. But I think Belgium, that was just a great game, and I think those two teams, I think at some point will face in the Euros, and I'm actually kind of hoping that that's the final.
I feel like, how every team, I don't know which is going to be the generation that's lost. You know how Hungary had never won a tournament, and They're forgotten nowadays as an elite.
They're better than a lot of teams that did.
They're better. They are. But no one remembers them. I ask around, and they're always like Brazil, Germany, France, Spain, even. Which stinks. But hey, they never remember Hungary. Who do you think runs the biggest risk of that in this generation? Netherlands or Belgium?
Oh, it's got to be Belgium. They've been preaching us the golden generation of Belgian football for like the last 8 years, that they're gonna explode and do this and do that and do the other thing. And the truth is they need to win something, or else it's not justified. They'll forget that they exist. With Holland, I feel like they'll remember them slightly because they made the World Cup final, and then they made a semifinal 2 World Cups in a row. They were in the last 4. Maybe not the average person, but football fans will remember those because hit them more because of that. Where Belgium, if they win nothing with that team that they had, and I forgot to mention before, they've KDB too. So it's just like there's no excuse for them not to win anything. And I think the Euros may be their last chance to do it. Because if they don't win the Euros, they will be mentally broken for the World Cup and they won't be able to perform.
I feel that way. Like, it's not to demean anyone or to overrate anyone. But when Greece had won a Euro, the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia, due to the Panenka penalty kick over Germany, I believe, the Soviet Union, either one.
And Denmark won the Euros too.
Yeah, and Denmark. When these teams are capable of winning a championship, it just makes you wonder not only what is going on with Belgium, but is it mental? Is it physical? Is it tactical? Like, what costs them? What do you think is costing Belgium? Now, if we look back, it was a 1-0 loss to Argentina in the 2014 World Cup, 3-1 demolition, in my honest opinion, against Wales in the quarterfinals of the Euro, and then in the World Cup, a set piece. Well, Fellaini was outjumped by Umtiti, the near post. Since then, we haven't had anything to evaluate them for. But, I actually have another question as well. Okay.
All right, let me answer that first.
Yeah.
They sabotaged themselves by making wrong selections for the previous Euros. 2016, if they take Raja and they take Mertens, they win the Euros. No question. I think they're favorites in that tournament. I think they walk it. Look, Raja at that point in time was the best box-to-box midfielder in world football. Didn't even he wasn't even involved into the team. If I remember, it was either he wasn't involved.
It was the World Cup. You want to know something crazy? You read my mind perfectly, like those CNC machines, where it's like in the Euro he scored against Sweden, scored a crazy long shot.
All right, so my point is, hold on, just let me finish this point. My point is, he wasn't being used well in the Euros as well, though. So it was the Euros, and then it was the World Cup. If they take Raja, at least if they take him both times, and look, at that point he was the best box-to-box midfielder in the world football, not just Syria, not just Europe, the whole world. He was the best box at that time. And if you don't take him, and it wasn't like, if you take him, that's one thing. He needed to be in the starting lineup every game of the whole tournament. And look, Mertens has more goals for Napoli than Diego Maradona. And it seemed like he has to pay someone off just to get into the team. He scored in the World Cup. He was used in the game against Panama or something like that. And then he wasn't really used that much anymore. He scored in that game. And then he was more or less used as a sub against bigger teams. And I think that's what cost him as well.
He was brought on as a right winger. Like, you want to know something crazy? It reminds me, believe it or not, of the Gareth Bale situation at Real Madrid. So I'll explain. Yeah. When Bale first started his career, he was left back at Southampton and then at Tottenham Hotspur. Mm-hmm. Then he eventually became a world-class left winger. And because of Cristiano Ronaldo and wanting to integrate into Real Madrid, he became a right winger. Right. But then there was one game in La Liga where Marcelo was injured, Contral was injured, and they were like, we're going to play Bale at left back. And everyone lost their minds. They're like, he made all this progress to become a world-class attacker. Why are you going to put him back in defense? Yeah. I feel like the same thing happened to Mertens. He started his career as a left winger, diminutive. Yeah. Then he became a world-class striker. But now, because there's just no space for him, they chuck him back at right wing. And he just doesn't fit there. Against France, I remember he could not cross the ball. It's not like he was incapable, but it's just like that's not his thing. When you're so far removed from something, You're just not the same player. And what bothered me was that people were saying Mertens wasn't good because he played under pressure and badly in his not
Yeah,
national.
I think that's egregious. Obviously he's not better than Diego Maradona, but let me say that again. He's got more Napoli goals than Diego Maradona. He is their all-time leading scorer. He's been there for like 7 years, and that's it. So he's scoring at a higher pace than any Napoli player of all time in that time span. So that should tell you everything you need to know. And it's not like if he was the highest scoring player for like Anderlecht or something, it doesn't matter as much. But he's in Serie A and scoring on a regular basis, and he's been, at least during that time, he had just come off a great season the year before and was starting to explode in that team. So I just really think that Raja and Mertens being involved in a very important way in those teams made the difference. So unfortunately, this sword ends up stabbing Roberto Martinez because he's the one who made those decisions. And I think he's a good manager. I don't think he's a great manager, but I think he's serviceable. And I think he's done a good job more or less. But the thing is, if he doesn't make those two errors, he might be sitting home with the World Cup and the Euros. So that's what these little decisions can really determine, because the second that he makes those decisions, look, Roger was the best box to box midfielder. Because he's not in that team in those moments, whoever they're playing can attack that part of the field because they don't have a secure player in that position. People like Fellaini was getting starting minutes over Raja in that same position. So it's just like, yes, he's done a good job, but he also cost them maybe not two. I think they would have won at least one of those. Probably the Euros, because I felt all due respect to Portugal, they deserved to. That was an incredible moment for that country who hadn't won anything ever really. And France, and it's so heartbreaking seeing France not be able to win after what happened to them in that country. There wasn't a really, neither team was like so superior that they would, you know what I mean. So it's just like with all that, if they had played in that particular way, they probably would have won the Euros, just because France and Portugal weren't that strong. I mean, Portugal finished third in their group. In previous European competitions, they wouldn't have even made it out of the group. So. And then France did what they did, but there wasn't a significantly powerful team in that. And if you put Roger and Mertens on Belgium, I think it's game over.
Man, I'm going to end with a crazy hot take.
Okay.
I've always felt this way. Do you feel like Eden Hazard might be a hindrance to Real Madrid and to the Belgian national team?
At this point?
At this point, yes, only now.
Yeah. Look, I'm sorry. At this point, I don't think we can even call him good. At this point, he's an average footballer. Like, look, he played for Real Madrid 15 games or whatever last season. He got injured, but this is the part that really is the trump card for me. He's taken many shots at Real Madrid. He's only taken one shot that I thought was a good strike. It was against Lyon. Very early against it was in not Lyon. I think it was the who got bounced by it. Oh, it was Real Madrid. My bad. Sorry, Man City. Sorry, it was against Man City in the Champions League second leg. He hit a great strike right inside the box. Really good speed on it and everything. Perfect hit. And then later in that game, he had another 3 shots. I'm like, awful. And then you watch him in La Liga. Hasn't hit. He can't even he's at the point now where I don't think he can hit water if he fell out of a boat. So it's just like he's got 2 options. He can ride this out, sit on the bench, and maybe win something, or he can go. I think they really should put him on loan, but he should not be starting for Belgium at this until you see some growth in his game and improvement at Real Madrid. Because there's a lot of good players in that position in the Belgium national team. You can't give it to him just based on reputation.
And that's what I feel. Do you remember the Euros? Going into that season, Chelsea finished 10th, and Hazard had 4 league goals and didn't score a goal for a whole year. Yeah. Now, I'm sorry, Hazard. Great player. But this is not the first time this happens. He goes on these quadrannual dry spells where it's like, wow, I paid 100 million. But I'm going to have to go for one season where he is just useless. And that's very demoralizing. Especially imagine the young Belgian players.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing him still start ahead of them. Like, what motivation are you going to have? You could put up 100 goals in a season because his name is Eden Hazard. You won't start. And I feel like that's the Mertens situation.
Yeah. I'll say this, though, about Hazard real quick. He's in danger. Like, look, when he left to go to Real Madrid, he was on path to being a football legend. At least not top 5, obviously, but a top 100 player. He was on the path of being a football great. He's in danger of not being one at all. So if this is the level for the rest of, and this is the problem. If he was like 34 years old and he's playing like this, okay, I got you. But if he's at this age and he can't perform like this again, like we need to see Chelsea Hazard again, or we're gonna forget. Well, all we're gonna remember is what he did at Real Madrid, and then there'll be a documentary done on Hazard, and then people will now realize, oh, what happened, because he was so great at Chelsea. And I think people will start to forget the Chelsea years if we continue to see him play at such a low standard. And look, he is as talented as anybody, so there's no excuse for him not to be reaching these heights. Maybe Real Madrid was just a little bit too big of a push for him. Maybe he should have gone to a team that had a little less pressure. And obviously, there's a lot of things to consider. But if he doesn't shape up soon, he won't be remembered as a Premier League legend, which he is.
And it just blows my mind. Really does. Like Neymar Hazard comparisons.
Yeah.
They were like yesterday. And you remember, it was like two magnets, honestly.
Yeah.
You could not separate them. Dribbling, 5'8", slow center of gravity.
Yeah.
But honestly, man, it's the injuries that get to me, because it's not actually just the injuries. He is misperforming when he is fit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a lot that he has to do. And I don't know what he can do, because there's not quite another Eden Hazard out there that can mentor him. You know how, for example, let's say Dembele was suffering, like from, I guess, a lack of...
Well, Dembele was suffering from a product of his environment, right? So if Dembele goes any other team other than Barcelona, you're probably going to see what he was at Dortmund again. And it's so funny saying that, because it's most people forgot that he was even there because of how poor he was at Real Madrid, or not Barcelona. So I think it's with Dembele, it's a product of his environment. It's some of the dysfunction that's going on at Barcelona. He was bought by a team that didn't really want him to begin with. And they wanted to please the fans and what they were looking for. So for him, if he goes on to loan to, like, I don't know, Man United in such a bad situation, I'm not even going to bring that up, but just a team that's just a little lower. If he went back to Dortmund on a loan, or he went to a Frankfurt, or he went to like a Napoli or something, or Bayern Munich, or any team in Germany, most of the teams in Italy, even some Premier League teams. Although I would rather him in Germany or Italy, but if he went to one of those teams, I think you'd see superstar again. If you move Hazard at this point, I'm not sure you see that in the same way. So that's why I separate them a little bit. Hazard was not derailed by a product of his environment. They wanted him. He wanted to go there. And the reason he hasn't been playing that much is because he couldn't perform, not because he was not the idea of the director to begin with. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think Dembele just has a much better chance of resurrecting his career at this point.
Wow. Next week for sure, but Dembele to Bayern, I don't know. I came up with that like 20 seconds ago. But now that I think about it, if you had the funds for it, would you go for it as Bayern Munich? Would you?
I would, but again, at this point, if I'm Bayern Munich, the first thing I'm thinking about is my defense that conceded 9 goals in 3 games. So obviously, defensively, that's my first aim. If I have money left over and I can get him, then of course I'm going to do it, because they have Serge Gnabry and they have Sané, who hasn't really done anything yet, other than one header that was kind of close against Hoffenheim. But bringing him in, although they just signed Douglas Costa, so I'm not sure if I can negotiate a deal on a loan or something, or a loan with option to buy or something like that, I would probably pull the trigger just to see if you can sort of, figure something out.
The reason I ask is because he's Bundesliga proven. It's not just any
Yeah.
old.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no, for sure. But I would rather see him at if I'm cheering for Dembele, and I would rather not see him go from Barcelona to a team that's just a step behind them or a step above them, whatever. Because Barcelona was difficult. If he goes to a Bayern Munich, which at this point is as a higher standard, or back to Dortmund, which is an equally standard, I would rather see him on a team that is still good, that still might be in the Champions, that still might challenge, but this is a little lower, where they don't necessarily have a superstar player like a I don't know, if we're talking Germany, maybe like Gladbach, for example, maybe Frankfurt. I don't think he'd ever do Frankfurt, but I think that would be a perfect place for him. But
what about
Gladbach, what's that?
what about Leipzig?
That's a good one too. And then then you can go for a Wolfsburg, one of these teams that he can go to, he can get his groove back, and then he can start showing that. And maybe Barcelona just loan him out for a year and see if he can do it, and maybe they bring him back and figure out a way for him to be sort of used in this team a little bit more than he is.
Because like I had it planned, Sancho to Man United, Dembele to Dortmund. I thought those funds work. That kind of narrative works. They're both happy. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a possibility?
For that to happen now, I mean,
well, not now. In the next summer transfer window.
Look, I think one of those is possible. I think Dembele could go to Dortmund, and I think Sancho could leave. Look, I don't care if he agreed on personal terms. There's no way he's going to Man United, and here's why. You watch Dortmund play, you look at what he's around. Why on earth would you go there? And I know I said that a few weeks ago, but I need to say it again because some Man United fans just don't agree with this. Look, yes, it's a beautiful story if he goes to Man United and he resurrects them from the dooms of hell or whatever, and he rises up and he's the hero of Manchester United and they're challenging for titles again. But he's one guy. He can't do everything. He can't be the left back, the right back, the center back, the midfielder, the striker. He can't do everything. And you're going to be around Rashford, Greenwood, and there's a bunch of stuff that I don't like that much. So if you're Sancho, and even though Sancho probably wants to play for Man United, and maybe he will one day, I don't think after this transfer window or next summer that he'll look at it then the same way because it's becoming so much less enticing. I could see him going to Chelsea, I could see him going to Man City, I could even see him going to like a Juve. I could see him going to I don't know, just PSG, one of these better teams. But you can't. If he does this, he's so dumb. But because if you're with Dortmund, with Haaland and Brandt and Hazard and Reina and Berkey and with all these superstars, you're gonna go from that to being by yourself, having to watch Lingard, dribble the ball for 20 minutes. So I mean, if you're Sancho, you might go elsewhere. I'll say this to answer your question. Sancho will leave Dortmund next summer. I don't think he should. I think he should stay as long as he can because I'm not sure there's a better situation for a young player to be in right now. But Dortmund won't sweat it because they have a bunch of young players. They can get Dembele back or something. He will leave. I just don't know where he goes. But I just at this point, I have a hard time believing it's Man United. In the beginning of the summer, I thought that was a high possibility. But now, based on how Dortmund's playing, based on he knows now what he's playing with, so I just don't think he makes the Man United move. But I do think he will probably leave this summer, and Dembele could facilitate his way back to Dortmund, and maybe that works. But he'll leave. It's not going to be Man United unless he just doesn't. You know what I mean.
I have a friend who loves Dortmund. He will definitely tune in. He breathes Dortmund. His favorite player is Royce. And for next week, we'll definitely discuss this. But I feel like if Royce inevitably just becomes, way too injury prone, or they need to find a replacement for him because he is aging after all. Mm-hmm. I'd like to look at that for next week, like all the young pieces they have. Actually, to do more research because they have Giovanni Reina, they have Haaland, they have Sancho, they have Brandt. Then their midfield, Delaney is not the youngest in the world, but he's still pretty young. Yeah. Witzel. They have a lot of pieces, and that's
then they have that center back too, Zag something.
Zagadou? I believe.
Yeah, Zagadou.
Really tall, 6'5". But
Yeah.
he did commit a like criminal back pass against Bayern
And
last
then they
season.
have that 15-year-old who's scoring like playing FIFA
Oh,
on rookie
yeah.
mode. And
I forget his name.
he's not, yeah, I think he's French. I could be wrong about that. But
I'll have to-
he's not eligible to play for the first team till he turns 16. And at the moment, he's only 15 years old. So once he turns 16, he's going to be included in the team as well. So like, if you're a player and you're playing for Dortmund, I just look. I understand that there's opportunities everywhere. If I'm on if you're at Dortmund, I would stay there as long as I can because that team is only going to get better and better and better, and they have the weapons to dethrone Bayern. Because again, Bayern conceding goals on a regular, and I know they lost to them in the Super Cup, but they have everything they need to take it to the next level. So I think that whole team is just very intriguing to me at the moment.
Absolutely. But definitely more for next week because I have a lot of fresh ideas, but I need to do more research because these young players, they're popping up every day. And, one day they could look like the next Messi, and the next day inevitably they don't.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely good to keep an eye on them, though. And Elliot, it's always been a pleasure.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Next Sundays always at the same time. So I'll catch you guys later. Thank you for tuning in to Football Apex podcast.